Now it's time to cover winning pots with the power position. Now the majority of your stack building during a tournament will come when you are playing hands in position. When out of position, unless you have a very strong hand, it is very difficult to get maximum value for your winning hands, while at the same time, it's also very difficult to successfully execute bluffs. The real beauty of small ball is best illustrated by turn play in position. You can keep the pot small with your betting and force your opponent to take large risks if he decides to get aggressive. Let me share an example with you that really helps tell the story. In this example, I'm not even going to tell you what you have just yet. With blinds at 50 and 100, a player from late position makes it 300 to go. You call on the button and take the hand heads up. Now the flop comes ace-8-4 with 2 of a suit. Your opponent hangs on to the lead by betting 600 in the flop. You call again. Now the turn card is the 5 of spades. Whatever your opponent has, unless of course he has the absolute nuts, he is not going to love that card. It hits a 2-3 straight, a 6-7 straight, and also makes a flush possible. If you were your opponent with a hand like ace-king, how much would you really love your hand at that moment? Sure, you have aces with a king kicker, but if you play a big pot in this situation, how in the world could you ever be in good shape? Many players might check the ace-king in that spot, and if you're a small ball player, you should too. If you bet the turn and get raised, your opponent could easily be semi-bluff raising you with, say, ace-queen with the queen of spades. Since it would be difficult to call a raise with the ace-king, being out of position, checking is the cautious play. Okay, so we still don't even know what we have yet, and I'm still not going to tell you. With 1950 in the pot, you should bet about 1200 with virtually any hand that you have. If you have the flush, you're betting it for value. If you have 8-9, you're betting it as a pure bluff. Or if you have an ace, you'll be betting it to A, protect your hand, and B, help to define your opponent's hand. Here's where the beautiful part comes into play. Even if your opponent knows that you'll often float the flop with a weak hand, because he's out of position, his weapons are limited. In fact, anything other than checking and calling is a risky play. Folding may be a little too weak facing a 1200 bet, and check raising is usually very costly when you're beat. As a small ball player, while you actually prefer your opponents to check and call rather than check and raise you so you can control the pot size, even when they check raise, it's beneficial to the small ball player in the long run. If your opponent check raises you with his ace-king, he'll probably risk anywhere from 4,200 to 6,000, or possibly even his whole stack. That puts him in a very vulnerable position and allows you to play a big pot only on your terms. If you were bluffing, oh well, you let him have the 1,200 bet. It's not the end of the world and won't put a huge debt in your stack. However, when you do have the goods, your opponent has already laid out a big bet there for you to capitalize on. In fact, with his check raise, he may have committed himself to the pot, where in many instances, he'd be drawing completely dead. Let's look at another example, only this time I'm going to tell you what you have. With 100, 200 blinds, you raise from late position to 500 with 10 jack of hearts. The big blind, a rather conservative player who rarely re-raises unless he has a premium hand, re-raises the bet to 1,500. It's 1,000 more to you, and both you and your opponent are sitting on about 30,000 in chips. You call. The flop comes 6, 7, 8, giving you nothing but a gut shot straight draw and a backdoor flush draw. With 3,100 in the pot, your opponent bets 2,000. Now, despite the fact that all you have is a measly gut shot straight draw, this is an excellent flop for you, given the fact that your opponent's hand is pretty transparent. Aces, kings, queens, or maybe ace-king. While your hand is well disguised. There are lots of cards that could roll out on the turn that will help you earn this pot away from your opponent. If a 4, 5, 8, 10, or any club hits the turn, your opponent is certainly going to worry about your hand being better than his. Add all those draws hitting to the fact that you could easily have flopped a set as well, and this board is perfect for you to make a play at the pot. Also, if you do happen to get really lucky and hit the 9, you can try to milk your opponent slowly, not scaring him out of the pot. Okay, so let's say the turn card is the 5 of spades. Your opponent will likely check the turn. If he doesn't, you should seriously consider making a raise. It doesn't have to be a big raise either. If, say, your opponent bets 4,000, you could make it as little as 9,000. Any raise will get you the desired information you're looking for, and also, by making a smaller size raise, it might convince your opponent that you're inviting him to call. If he checks, as he's more likely to do, then you can approach the situation one of two ways. One, you can make another smallish bet on the turn. If he was just making a continuation bet with ace-king, he'll fold to a small bet on the turn. But if he has the aces or kings, he may decide to call a small bet and see what you do on the river. This is actually the greedy way to play the hand, provided that you are committed to bluffing the hand on the river as well. By making a smallish turn bet, you increase the likelihood that your opponent will call the turn bet, which will give you more to steal on the river. If your opponent calls your bet, you'll need to make a much larger bet on the river to take it down. Option 2 is actually a little safer since it will usually end the hand right then and there before anything crazy happens. If your opponent checks a turn, a bet of anywhere from 50 to 65% of the pot will allow you to take it down, even if he has aces. It's important to note, though, that when making these types of plays, you need to make sure you're up against the right type of opponent. One who is on the conservative side and one who is also aware that you could have any sort of a hand in this situation. Strangely, small ball works even better when your opponents know you'll sometimes raise with small cards. What it does for you is it opens up even more bluffing opportunities since you could feasibly hit any flop, whether it comes high cards, middle cards, or even wheel cards. Every flop could look dangerous to your opponent. The worst type of image you could have in a deep stack big blind tournament is that of a player who only raises with pocket pairs and ace paint. If your opponents know that you only raise from early position with these types of hands, they'll have too much information that will work against you when the flop comes small or coordinated. When a flop comes 5, 6, 7, that sort of image will hurt you regardless as to whether you have ace-king or pocket kings.